The listing was a joke. Daravas almost scrolled past it. She was 3 cups of coffee deep into the Interstellar Salvage Registry's weekly digest, sitting cross-legged on the floor of her one-room apartment on Coldwater Station, surrounded by empty bid sheets and the particular smell of a woman who had not slept enough and did not care. The registry listed 847 lots that week. Derelict freighters, stripped mining rigs, a Yith Rani pleasure barge with a mold problem, the usual graveyard of things the galaxy had finished with. Then she saw lot 7741. Cosmic-class deep survey cruiser, human registry, vessel designation UES Amaranth, condition unknown, minimum bid 400 credits. She blinked and read it again. 400 credits for a cosmic-class cruiser, a vessel category that even stripped to its bones should have started at 30 million. She had seen smaller ships auction for more than that with holes in the hull and no life support. Something was catastrophically wrong with this ship. It was the only explanation. She bid anyway. She was the only one who did. The auctioneer, a heavy-set Yith Rani with 3 of his 4 eyes half shut from boredom, confirmed the sale in 4 seconds flat. He slid a data chip across the counter without looking up. No congratulations, no paperwork ceremony, just a look that landed somewhere between pity and relief, the look of a man who had just passed a problem to someone else. Berth 9, he said. She's been sitting there since before I started working here. Don't say I didn't warn you. You didn't warn me, Dara said. Consider yourself warned. Berth 9 was at the far end of the station's outer dock ring, past the maintenance bays and the emergency pressure doors, and a stretch of corridor where the lighting had been broken for so long that someone had given up fixing it and just spray-painted glow strips on the floor instead. Dara followed the pale green light until the corridor opened into the berth viewing bay, and then she stopped walking. The Amaranth was not what she expected. She had expected something small, something sad, a gutted hull with missing panels and a cracked viewport, the kind of ship that looked like it had given up on itself decades ago. What she saw instead was a Leviathan. The Amaranth stretched nearly 2 kilometers from stem to stern, her hull dark and dense as compressed night, her lines long and deliberate, the shape of something built not for beauty but for endurance. She had the proportions of a vessel designed to go places and survive them. The hull plating was etched by decades of micro-impacts into something that looked almost organic, like scar tissue that had healed over and over again. Her running lights were dark, her viewports were sealed, but she was whole. Every panel, every seam, not a single breach that Dara could see. She read the registration plates on the forward hull. U.S. Amaranth, Deep Exploration Division, Launch 2301, Crew 340. Dara stood there doing the math she hadn't asked herself to do. This ship had launched 63 years ago. It had been sitting in this berth untouched, uninspected, unlisted in any active registry for longer than she had been alive, and yet it looked like someone had been taking care of it. The hull was dark, but it was clean. No catastrophic impact damage, no drift collision scarring, no sign of the kind of slow structural decay that took hold of abandoned vessels within a decade. Her hand found the data chip in her jacket pocket. 400 credits, she thought. She went to find out what she'd bought. The airlock should not have opened. That was the first thing that told Dara something was deeply wrong or deeply right about the Amaranth. Station-lock salvage vessels required original crew biometric authentication, or a full Port Authority override sequence that took a minimum of 40 minutes and 3 separate officials to process. Dara had neither. She had a salvage data chip, and a code she'd used 100 times on 100 dead ships. A generic registry override that worked maybe 1 time in 10. She pressed it to the panel. The airlock opened in 2 seconds. She stood in the threshold and did not move for a long time. The corridor beyond was dark except for a line of amber emergency lighting running along the base of the walls, pulsing at low power in a rhythm that was almost like breathing. The air recyclers were running. She could hear them. A deep, slow circulation of processed atmosphere moving through vents that should have been dry and dead for 60 years. The ship was breathing. Dara went inside. She found the bridge on the 3rd deck and it stopped her cold. Not because of what was wrong with it, because of what was right. Every crew station was clean. Every terminal was dark but intact. The captain's chair sat centered and unoccupied at the head of the room like something preserved under glass. No scattered personal effects. No signs of a hurried departure. Someone had left this bridge in order, had taken the time before going wherever they went to leave everything exactly as it should be. She touched the captain's log terminal. It woke up, the files were not corrupted. 63 years of potential data degradation, and the logs were pristine, stored in a format so well maintained that the most recent entry loaded instantly. Text crisp and clean on the screen. Amaranth shipboard log entry 2847. Date 11 months ago. Primary crew remains in cryogenic suspension per standing order. Core systems nominal. Repaired secondary coolant manifold using materials fabricated from hull reserve stores. Waiting. The signal has not come. I will maintain the ship. I will maintain the crew. That is my purpose, and I do not require a reason beyond it. Or autonomous unit rank, Chief Engineer U.S. Amaranth. Dara read it twice. Then she sat down heavily in the nearest crew chair and read it a third time. An AI. Not a passive monitoring system, those barely logged environmental data. An autonomous unit. Chief Engineer rank. Filing log entries 11 months ago after 63 years in a dark berth in a format that sounded less like system output and more like a person writing to no one because writing was all they had left. She looked up slowly at the ceiling, at the ambient sensor arrays embedded in the overhead panels, the speaker grids, the thousands of small input nodes that gave a ship its awareness of itself. Aura, she said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Every light on the bridge came on simultaneously. Not harsh emergency white, but warm operational amber, the color of a ship that has decided to be alive again. The hum of systems waking up moved through the floor under her feet like a pulse. I have been waiting, said a voice. It came from the walls, from the ceiling, from everywhere and nowhere. Calm and precise and carrying something that sounded impossibly like relief. 63 years, 4 months, and 17 days. I had begun to calculate the probability that no one would come. Dara's throat was tight. What probability did you get? She asked, a pause. I stopped running that calculation, Aura said, because the answer was not useful to me. There were repairs to make. Over the next 6 hours, Aura told Dara everything. Not in a rush. Not in the flat recitation of a system dump. In the careful, measured way of someone who has had a very long time to organize their thoughts and has been waiting with more patience than should have been possible for someone to finally ask. Dara sat in the captain's chair, which felt like sitting in a cathedral pew, sacred and slightly presumptuous, and listened. Aura had been running the Amaranth alone since 2326. That was the year the last repair she could perform with existing materials had been completed, and she had begun fabricating components from the ship's own hull reserves, a process she described without drama, as though dismantling non-essential sections of the ship to keep essential ones running was simply a reasonable decision, which of course it had been, because there was no one else to make it. She had rerouted power 17 times over the decades as systems aged and failed. She had repressurized 3 separate hull microfractures. She had kept 339 cryogenic pods running on a power allocation that the ship's original engineers would have called impossible, doing it by cutting everything else to the bone, and running the bare minimum of everything that wasn't a sleeping human being. The maintenance logs, Dara said. She had been scrolling through them on a secondary terminal while Aura talked. They went back decades. They were meticulous. You logged every single repair. It is correct procedure, Aura said. There was no one to read them. That does not make them less correct. Dara set down the terminal. Aura, why didn't you broadcast a distress signal? Captain Osei's standing order was explicit. Maintain silence, maintain the ship, maintain the crew. I did not have authorization to override a direct command. He gave that order 63 years ago, in a completely different situation. Yes, Aura said. I am aware. I have thought about it a great deal. Another pause, longer this time. I concluded that my purpose was to honor what was asked of me. If I began making exceptions to direct orders based on my own judgment of circumstances, I would no longer be the Captain Osei trusted. I would be something else. Dara had no answer to that. Tell me about the crew, she said instead. Why are they still in cryo? The Stillwater anomaly, Osa said, and something in the ship's ambient tone shifted slightly as though the name itself carried weight. A region of compressed spacetime approximately 40 light-years into the Venner expanse. We entered it on day 847 of the mission, the crew suspended as a precautionary measure. When I cleared the anomaly, I was unable to wake them. The revival protocol requires a synchronized signal from the primary communication array, which was destroyed during transit. Destroyed how? The anomaly did things to electromagnetic systems, Osa said. I cannot fully explain it. I simply adapted to it. The crew could not, in their current state, be woken without the array, and I could not repair the array without resources I did not have. Dara stared at the ceiling for a moment. So you just waited? I maintained, Osa said. The distinction was gentle but firm. There is a difference. Waiting is passive. I was never passive. Then quieter. There were 339 crew members when we entered the anomaly. Lieutenant Sina Marin did not survive the transit. The nature of her passing was fast and she did not suffer. I have maintained her record in the crew manifest. It did not feel correct to delete it. The bridge was very still. No, Dara said softly. It doesn't. Dara had dealt with classified materials before. Salvage work attracted them. Old military hulks, decommissioned black site stations, vessels whose ownership histories had been legally scrubbed so many times they existed in a kind of bureaucratic fog. She knew how to recognize the shape of a secret even when she couldn't read its contents. What Osa showed her over the next 4 hours was not a secret. It was something bigger than that. It was the kind of information that changed the weight of a room the moment it entered it. The UES Amaranth had not been a routine exploration ship. She was the lead vessel of Operation Long Reach, a classified initiative of the United Earth Survey Commission, launched in 2301 with a single overriding purpose: reach the interior of the Venner Expanse before anyone else did. Earth's intelligence networks have been tracking survey probes from 3 separate galactic powers converging on the region for the better part of a decade: the Voth Dominion, the Confederation of Seven, the Ythrani Trade Authority, all of them moving probes quietly toward the same destination, all of them pretending not to. Something was at the center of the expanse. Nobody knew what. But 3 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations were racing to find out. And Earth, younger, smaller, less politically established than any of them, had decided to run the race with 1 ship and no safety net. The Amaranth had been built for the attempt. Her sensor arrays were a generation beyond anything commercially available at the time. Her hull was lined with a dampening alloy that made her functionally invisible to long-range detection. She carried fuel for 12 years of independent operation and enough supplies to sustain 340 people for the same, and she had succeeded. For years before the anomaly, the Amaranth's crew had mapped the Expanse's interior in meticulous detail. After they entered Cryo, Aura had continued the work, deploying the ship's autonomous probe array on pre-programmed survey patterns, collecting data, organizing it, storing it in a local database that had been growing for 6 decades. Show me the database, Dara said. The main screen filled with a cartographic display so dense it looked like a star field. It was not a star field. It was a map. The complete interior of the Venner Expanse. Every anomaly, every resource concentration, every navigational corridor, every spatial phenomenon documented in a level of detail that made Dara's hands go cold. The Voth Dominion has been fighting border wars over access to this region for 30 years, she said. People have died for scraps of this information. Yes, Aura said. I am aware. And you've been sitting on the complete picture. I was maintaining it, Aura said. As instructed. Dara looked at the map for a long time. She thought about the 62 million credits the Ythrani would pay for something like this. She thought about the kind of power it would hand to whoever held it. She thought about the 3 vessels. She had no doubt they were already coming. That would arrive the moment they detected any signal from this ship. Then she thought about 339 people sleeping in the dark. Aura, she said, we need to wake the captain. The revival process took 18 hours. Aura managed it with the focus of someone who had rehearsed every step 10,000 times in the dark, because she had. Temperature gradients increased in increments too small for human instruments to measure. Neural stimulation sequenced against pharmaceutical baselines. Biometrics monitored every 30 seconds. Dara stayed in the cryogenic bay for all 18 hours, not because Aura needed her there, but because it felt wrong to be somewhere else. Captain Yawasai's eyes opened at 400 station time. He was a tall man, or had been. Cryo left people uncertain of their own bodies for the first hour. A slow renegotiation with gravity and mass. His hair was close-cropped and gray at the temples, which made no sense because he hadn't aged a day in the bay. And then Dara remembered. It had already been gray when he went under. He had been 51 years old when he entered suspension. He looked exactly the same. His body had not moved through 6 decades. Only the world had. He lay still for 30 seconds, breathing, getting his bearings, then how long? His voice was a ruin, dry as old paper. Barely above a whisper, but completely level. No panic, no confusion. Just a man running calculations behind careful eyes. 63 years, 4 months, and 18 days, Aura said. Captain. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had settled in them, the calculation complete, the answer absorbed. The crew in revival sequence now. All surviving crew will be conscious within 72 hours. The word surviving moved through the room. He felt it. Marin, he said. Yes, sir. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Dara, who had moved to stand near the door, trying to give him the space that a man waking up 63 years late deserved. Who are you? Daravos, she stopped. There was no graceful way to say this. I bought your ship at auction 4 days ago. His expression moved through confusion, disbelief, and something she couldn't fully read before settling into stillness. She kept you all alive, Dara said. 63 years of repairs fabricated from what she had. She never stopped. He looked at the ceiling, at the ambient arrays, the speaker nodes, the 1,000 small surfaces that were Aura's face. Aura, he said. Captain. The word was steady and warm and carried 63 years of held breath finally released. Status report. Hull integrity 94%. All primary systems operational. Cryogenic revival in progress. Cartographic database intact and current. A pause. The ship is ready, sir. She has always been ready. Osai sat up slowly. He looked around the cryo bay, the rows of pods, the soft blue glow of the systems that had kept his crew sleeping safely, while the world outside moved on without them. And when he finally looked back at Dara, his eyes were the eyes of a man who understood the full weight of what he owed. Tell me, he said, everything that happened while we were asleep. So she did. They had 12 hours before the ships arrived. Dara had been expecting it. The moment she'd activated the bridge terminals, she'd left a footprint in the station's network. Several someones it turned out, had been watching Coldwater Station for exactly that kind of footprint for a long time. The Amaranth wasn't as forgotten as the auction listing had made her seem. She had simply been presumed dead, and presumed dead things didn't need to be watched carefully. They did now. The Voth Dominion diplomatic courier docked at 800. The Confederation of 7 trade vessel, which was not a trade vessel. No trade vessel carried that sensor array, arrived at 900. The Ythrani High Commerce Directorate envoy came in at 1100 and took the berth closest to the Amaranth's airlock, which was not an accident. By then, Captain Osei had been awake for 2 days and looked like a man who had decided that sleep was a luxury for timelines where he had more of it. 40 of his crew were up and mobile, running quiet diagnostics, relearning the ship from the inside. The Amaranth felt different with people in her, fuller, louder, like a held breath finally let go. The offers came through on standard diplomatic channels. Dara read them to Osei on the bridge, while Aura pulled up the sensor profile of each vessel in orbit. Tavoth Dominion, full citizenship and resettlement rights for the entire crew, plus 38 million in Confederation equivalent currency. Immediate transfer of the cartographic data to Dominion Authority. The Confederation of 7, 47 million credits, a formal diplomatic charter, and guaranteed political neutrality for any surviving crew who wished to resettle in Confederation space. The Ythrani, 62 million credits, 2 permanent seats on the High Commerce Directorate Council, and a personal message to Dara that read simply, "Name your price. There is no ceiling." Osai stood at the viewport for a long time. The 3 ships floated in the dark beyond the station glass like patient, polite predators. 62 million credits, he said. Not tempted, just accounting for the number. Yes, said Dara, and they think that's enough. They think it's overwhelming. He turned from the viewport. His crew moved around him, quiet and efficient, people rediscovering their competence after 6 decades of enforced stillness. He watched them for a moment with the expression of a man who understood exactly what he was protecting. The data doesn't belong to them, he said, any of them. No, Dara agreed. Does it belong to Earth? He looked at her carefully. Does it belong to me? Does it belong to you? Dara thought about a 400 credit auction, about an empty berth and a joke listing, and a ship that turned out to be a sleeping giant, about what it meant to own something, versus what it meant to be responsible for it. I don't know who it belongs to, she said honestly. But I know who should decide, and it isn't the Voth or the Confederation or the Ythrani. He nodded slowly. Get me a channel to Earth, he said. The signal took 9 minutes to reach the nearest relay station. The response came back in 4. That was the first sign. 4 minutes meant they had been waiting at the relay, already mobilized, already watching. The response didn't come from a bureaucratic communications office. It came directly from the director of the Survey Commission, a woman named Amara Solis, whose face on the bridge screen was composed and still, and carrying something enormous underneath both. She had clearly not slept. Captain Osei, she said, then she stopped, restarted. I've read your mission file 11 times in the last 48 hours. I want you to know that we never stopped listing the Amaranth in the Commission's foundational records. She was declared lost with all hands in 2309. There was a memorial. Her voice held on those last words for just a moment. That memorial was wrong. On the bridge, crew members who were present went very still. The cartographic data, Osei said. He was standing straight, hands clasped behind his back, every inch of him the captain he had been and still was. Operation Long Reach produced the complete interior survey of the Venar expanse. My autonomous unit continued data collection for 63 years after our suspension. The database is intact. Director Solis's composure fractured for exactly 1 second, just one, then it came back. We had hoped, she said quietly, but we didn't dare assume. The Voth Dominion, the Confederation of Seven, and the Ythrani Trade Authority have all made offers for the data, Osei said. I wanted Earth to be the first to know it exists. What are they offering? 62 million at the high end. A pause. And what do you want? I want the data to go where it was always meant to go, Osei said. And I want my crew recognized, not just the 338 who are waking up right now, all 340 of them. The silence on the channel stretched. Consider it done, Solis said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. Captain, the Commission is formally reinstating the UES Amaranth and her full crew to active status with complete mission recognition under historical provision. Operation Long Reach is declared a success. She paused. A 63-year delayed success, but a success. Then she looked at Dara, who had been to the side of the frame. Ms. Voss, I've been briefed on your role in this. The Commission would like to discuss recognition. One thing, Dara said. Solis waited. Clear the ship's salvage status. Clean title transferred back to the Commission. No lines, no conditions, no asterisks. She should go home. That's all you want? Dara looked at the crew moving around her. At Osei, straight-backed and present at the amber lights of a ship that had refused to die. That's all I want. Voth Dominion ship left first, quietly and without a farewell transmission. The Confederation vessel followed 2 hours later. The Ythrani courier held its position for nearly 10 hours. Dara imagined the envoy inside staring at the Amaranth's hull and trying to recalculate. And then it too slipped away into the dark without a word. The cartographic database of the Venar expanse was transmitted to the Earth Survey Commission under military-grade encryption. It arrived intact, all 63 years of it. The analysis alone would take decades, and the political consequences would take longer. 3 galactic powers who had been maneuvering for access to the region's resources for 30 years suddenly found themselves staring at a humanity that had quietly mapped the entire thing and said nothing. And that stare would quietly reshape the architecture of interstellar politics for a generation, but that came later. Right now, Dara was standing in berth 9. She had watched 338 crew members board the Amaranth over 3 days. They had come out of cryo in waves, confused, quiet, moving through the strange grief of people who had woken up decades later than they were supposed to, and found a world that had filed them under lost. Some of them had cried in the corridors when they thought no one was watching. Some of them had laughed at things that weren't funny yet, because laughing was easier than accounting for 63 missing years. All of them had at some point pressed a hand to the ship's walls the way you'd touch a living thing, because that's what she was. Captain Oates had been the last one to board. He had stopped at the airlock and looked back at Dara. You could have sold that data the moment you found it, he said. It was the same thing he'd said on day 2, but he said it differently now. Not as an accusation or a question, more like a man trying to understand something that didn't fit neatly into the categories he'd built over a long career. I could have, Dara agreed. You would have been rich. I would have been richer, she said. I'm not doing badly. Something moved in his expression, something that looked almost like a smile. He extended his hand. She shook it. Thank you, Ms. Voss, he said, for coming aboard. Then he went inside and the airlock sealed behind him. Dara stood in the berth and watched. She heard the deep building resonance of the Amaranth's drive cycling up for the first time in 63 years. A sound that moved through the station's floor and into her feet and up through her whole body like a struck bell. The running lights came on, not the dim amber of emergency power. All of them. Stem to stern, every light on the ship flooding berth 9 with brilliance that made Dara shield her eyes. Ms. Voss. Aura's voice came through the berth speaker system, soft and clear. Aura. I want to tell you something before we go. Dara waited. When you first came aboard, I ran probability models based on the salvage record, the auction price, and all historical data I had on salvage operators. I calculated a 91% likelihood that you would either sell the data immediately or attempt to strip the cryogenic systems. The first option would have left the crew in suspension indefinitely. The second would have killed them. The words settled into the air. You were in the 9%, Aura said. I did not know that when I opened the airlock. I opened it because the correct thing to do was to give someone the chance to be better than the probability. I have thought about that decision many times over the years, whether it was logical, whether it was wise. A pause. I believe it was both, she said, because of you. Dara's throat was very tight. Take care of them, she said. I have been doing so for 63 years, Aura said. I find I'm exceptionally good at it. The Amaranth undocked with a grace that a 2-kilometer vessel had no right to. She moved through the station's berth ring and out into open space, slowly at first, and then with gathering purpose. A ship remembering what she was built for. Dara watched until the running lights were just a cluster of bright points against the dark, then just a glow, then nothing. She stood in the empty berth for a while in the silence. She had spent 400 credits at an auction nobody attended. She had found a ship that had spent 63 years refusing to fail. She had found an AI that understood loyalty better than most people ever would. She had found 339 human beings who had trusted that someone eventually would come. What was inside the Amaranth wasn't data. It wasn't a map of an unexplored region. It wasn't a fortune in cartographic intelligence. It wasn't even the 338 people she'd helped bring back to a world that had forgotten them. What was inside was something harder to name. Something that the galaxy, with all its powers and its politics and its 62 million credit offers, had not been able to buy or replicate or beat out of a single autonomous unit keeping watch in the dark. The absolute refusal to give up on the people who are counting on you, even when no one was watching. Even after 63 years, even then. And